Welcome, thanks guys for tuning back in to my next entry in the series highlighting the players participating in CT Mass Battle. Today we're going to be talking about Almaz, invited from the Massachusetts side. I don't know, that feels pretty fair to say that Almaz is a bit of a dark horse in this race. Um, doesn't have quite the same amount of tournament placements that some of these other participants have. And in that, I think he might be one of the hungriest players participating. A pretty talented Akuma player who, when he does come out, tends to do fairly well. Usually makes it into the top 8. The last placement that I have of his, if you'll indulge me as I lean over, is a 5th place finish at the March 31st Balance Patch event, which he did fairly well at, and both of the matches that I'm going to be going into to highlight Almaz are from that event. Both of those matches are in top 8 losers side. We have a match that he wins against Tom Vigil, aka Team Hate Salesman, playing Abigail, and then a match that he loses in a very close set to Lucky D's Cammy. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. It was, Almaz is probably the player that it was the hardest to do this type of research for, just because he simply hasn't come out very often. So this is the match wherein he wins. From the get-go, what I found about Almaz's play very typically is it's very ground game and neutral focused. Lots of movement, very much interested in playing a footsies style game. What we're going to see in this match is he will jump a lot, but typically he's jumping in ranges where if Abigail is going to anti-air him, he's probably already committing to that anti-air. He's got such a tall hurt box that it's usually pretty easy to hit him higher up. And it's going to force Vigil to start watching for these jumps, and it's going to sort of reopen that ground game for him. Nice whiff punish on the low forward. A shame he's a little too far away to get that Tatsu. And back throw into the corner. I've done a couple of matches in some of the other videos where we ended up using Mike Smith, aka Volcanic Akuma, as a reference. And one of the things that's really interesting to compare between the two is that Mike Smith, in a lot of those matchups, goes to demon flip shenanigans a lot. And Almaz doesn't go to that really nearly as often. It's a lot more solid, ground focused, proper meaties and frame kills. This is a cool setup, and he does this a lot where he'll use the V trigger screen freeze to decide behind and buffer some sort of input that'll really help him. So he gets on the board with that first round. Oh, a nice whiff punish there from Vigil. That's one of the few times where he does jump at that full screen range, and it doesn't end up working out for him. I like that challenge there to the run. He has a couple of really nice answers to run here. Nice little walk under. Steals the corner, but also ends up crossing him up on the trip guard. Jesus, that red fire. This matchup seems really rough for Abigail, because Akuma has the tools to blow up the armor that he does have. Seems really difficult. Although, admittedly, if Abigail manages to get in and get his game started, Akuma bleeds, so. As I reconsult my notes in the downtime in between rounds. It seems as though he's ending up in the corner a lot and then is able to steal the corner position back as Vigil overextends. Catches with the jump back and then a nice cheeky cross under again, and just like that, Vigil's in the corner and now he has to eat this pressure in this mix. And I said again, another answer to the run, just dealing with that armor. Oh, that's an unfortunate drop, but no back throw there from Vigil, so Almaz still with the whole screen available to him. And a nice buffer off the low forward to catch Almaz trying to walk back out of range. That is one thing. In order for Almaz to establish the footsie game, he has to get around the buttons that Abigail does have. Abigail's crouching jab is pretty good. He's got he has answers. Oh wow, just catching him. That's the thing about playing that ground focused game and doing the footsie walk. Wow, Jesus, catches the backdash on wake up with the Torrid Spheres. Oh, is this where he does? Yep, instant overhead. Pulls out the cheeky stuff. He pulls it out when he needs to. He's not the only player that I've highlighted that only seems to bring it out when it's critically important. And I like the stand short, crouching short stuff. That's as a Laura player, that's one of the bread and butters. Stand short is typically like a go-to button for establishing tick throws, and Almaz have been doing that a little bit in the corner already. So going to the low short there, catching Vigil holding up back or trying to tech. It's a weird trade. Stuck in the corner here. Vigil finds a little bit of momentum here. Ooh, guess is wrong. And playing with his food, I guess, does Vigil, giving Almaz the chance. Oh, that time able to walk back out of range, but finds the anti-air there. Now, the adjustment Tom ends up making, I think he over-adjusts, and Draken, I believe, is on the mic commentating this match from the get-go, and remarks that Tom's style in making adjustments is really hard reads. And you see a bit of it where Tom starts to really actively play around nullifying really either jumping or fireballs outside of his normal range. And I think it's sort of what allows for Almaz to start to get in is Salesman starts playing so explicitly around these things. But working nicely for him right now. He hasn't quite had that issue show up yet. Oh. Yeah, we're seeing the beginnings of it though. That back fierce, 2, 3 times in a row. Oh, wow. Abigail not in a great spot right now. That command grab range is absurd. And Tom's hitting buttons a lot. Almaz is doing a good job of keeping his block strings tight, and it's doubly important, right? Like on the one thing you want to do that against someone that you think is hitting buttons, but with Abigail, I don't believe any of his armor moves starts on frame one, so I could very well be wrong about that. But keeping your stuff tight is going to keep him from mashing out in any capacity. Standing short into crouching short again. I don't think that this one ends up killing. Jeez, just all crouch shorts. I don't know what Vigil's doing there. Maybe he's trying to mash super. Maybe he's trying to backdash, but... So let's take a second, and as I hit space and pause the wrong thing, let's take a second and try to take stock of what's gone on so far. Both of these sets end up being 3 out of 5 because at some of the BP events, they like to run all of top 8 as 3 out of 5 to emulate the CPT style. Almaz is playing a solid ground game. Vigil is looking for the jumps that Almaz established earlier in the set. And it's creating this gap where Almaz feels as though he can play sort of that walking shimmy game that, not shimmy, footsie game that he wants to play and to be able to set up these fireballs. And critically, when he is getting in, he's keeping his block strings and his pressure tight and is blowing up Vigil for trying to mash his way out. And those low shorts working out for him so much. And Tom making a bit of a change here, a little bit more jabs, but nice jump over there from Almaz. Stuck in the corner and blowing him up for hitting buttons on wake up yet again. And again, it's very much the story of this set is Almaz given Vigil the rope and Vigil very contentedly hanging himself. But, ooh, okay. This was an interesting spot to stop and take a second. When I watched this set for the first time, I was reminded of watching Justin Wong's Art of Playing Lame video and talking about how when he's got a dominant position and a life lead, sometimes he doesn't even bother going for the meaty and he just backs off because of the risk of making a mistake when you're trying to pressure them when you don't necessarily need to. And this moment that just happened reminded me of that. Almaz going for his pressure on Wake Up because he saw the light at the end of the tunnel and wanted to finish off the set. And it not working and turning into a big, potentially high-risk situation for him. And then following that up because he wants so badly to maintain the momentum in the position and not get Abigailed on, that he wakes up with Uppercut, which Vigil's wise to because Vigil has gone to tournaments for years and he's got a fairly decent game sense when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I mean, sometimes it smells like uppercuts, and Vigil knows how to sniff out an uppercut. And the side switch ends up being a really nice choice, although unfortunately he drops it and none of that ends up mattering. And then no buffer off the crouching short, finds an anti-air again. Almaz, he's had mixed results with the jumps. There are spots where he's jumping where he's getting it in spots where Abigail's going to have difficulty anti-airing. But, ooh, this ends up being really critical for him is execution mistakes. Oh, that's a nice whiff punish. Yeah, so the execution mistakes from Vigil end up leaving a fair amount of damage on the table. And like I said earlier, against Akuma, it feels like it's going to be difficult for Abigail, particularly in the state that Abigail is in right now. But when you do get in, if you're able to make your opportunities really count, you've got a lot of damage on the table and Akuma bleeds. If Vigil's leaving a lot of that damage on the table, he's reinventing the wheel. He needs to get back in to get the damage that he's missed out on because he dropped the combo or, played with his food and went for sweep instead of a proper stun combo. Nice jump in a little early. That seemed like it might have been a read on a fireball. Goes for demon flip stuff. Now, Almaz, like I said earlier, doesn't really go for demons flip stuff, particularly often at all. It seems like he's way more interested in playing this ground game, setting up, medium kick into red fire, and I really like that. I think that was a really cool moment. And in the next match that we'll look at, we'll see a little bit more stuff like that, where he's using the V-skill parry in setups. He is using it as his answer in a bait because he wants for you to do something. And him taking the round there and seeing that obviously Vigil's tournament life is on the line, and like I've said in a bunch of other situations, sometimes your choice is take a risk and activate V-trigger, but die, or blow your V-reversal and try to make something happen. The second you pop the first V-reversal, you're not getting V-trigger again, so it stands to reason that he's going to V-reversal again. Almaz wise to it, and ends up taking the round. So, what does it look like? It looks like Almaz is a ground-focused, neutral-focused, wants to play footsies, wants to play Street Fighter. Has a good sense of setting up those lows and the frame traps off of the lows in your tick throw situations to get you worried about actual grabs. Now, if you'll indulge me for a second, the next match that we will look at of his is a match between Almaz and Lucky D at the same event. It's actually the next match that Almaz plays in the bracket, and he ends up losing. And I'll say right now, in watching the set, frankly, it astounds me that he does lose. Because Almaz has Lucky D's number for a while in this set, and the momentum completely swings off of one round. Missed dive kick there from Lucky D. playing just a really footsies-oriented game here. It makes sense for these characters. These are both characters that are sort of trying to do that. Cammie's has great buttons and wants to maul you when she gets in. She's got great frame advantage, a fantastic walk speed. But most of the things that I just said also apply to Akuma. Wake up DP there from Almaz. An unfortunate drop. The slightest of delays there in the throw. You saw the little bit of the walk back, but Dan walking forward a little bit before the throw as well. Standing and crouching medium kick from Cammie ends up being a money button in this set. There was no reason for Dan to do that. And walking forward into it. So, I think Dan expected that Almaz was going to respect him. Oh, geez. I think that Dan expected that Almaz was going to play with more respect for Cammie's normals because of how little life he had. Instead, Almaz opts to face Lucky D, walk immediately into him, and then challenge with a higher priority button because Dan, probably would have hit standing short or standing jab when he saw that Almaz was meeting him in the middle, as it were. Priority system working out for Almaz there and giving him the medium kick. Or even if it's not counter hit, he walked into the medium kick. Yeah, so Dan with those crouching strongs, I imagine in Dan's head he's looking and recognizing that Almaz isn't crouch blocking. He's trying to walk back out of range. Or backdash. And there we already see, as I say it, those two whiffed medium kicks. Crouching medium kicks, rather. So already a bit of an adjustment. Taking that extra second, letting him walk back into range, and giving him exactly enough time to try to whiff punish with the crouch fierce. Nice anti-air. And a nice cross under there from Lucky D too. Crouching fierce working out pretty nicely for him too. Frame traps stuck in the corner. This is a bad spot to be in if you're Dan. Oh no, and a drop. And Dan has a lot of execution mistakes and a lot of strange matchup decision making here. There's a lot of Almaz getting away with murder or surviving around with the very slightest amount of health because Lucky D isn't playing optimally. And that makes sense. Lucky D is not a Cammie player. Challenging that walk forward there with the crouching strong. It's a lot of that. This largely ends up being a footsies oriented match. Stuck in the corner, going for the frame traps, not the tick throws. Nice neutral jump to blow up the dive kick and the side switch. Really good from Almaz. Like I said, it ends up being really surprising to me that Almaz ends up losing this set. As I watch it, Almaz is playing really nicely. Oh, Jesus. Challenging the hooligan. And a nice frame kill for the meaty setup. And that's one of the weird things I remark that Dan has a couple of weird decisions, and trying to go for the EX roll is one of them. There's better answers to the fireball. A pixel left, stuck in the corner, goes for the back throw this time. The last time Almaz went for the frame trap off the standing short into the crouching short, going for the back throw this time. Smart to change up the options. That buffer blows my mind. Such a strong lead to sit on right from the get-go. Gets Dan to bite in the shimmy. Dan's a player who sometimes prescribes to take the throw, too. So, sort of surprising to me. Yeah, that's a really nice walk under. This is a great position for Dan to be in. Jesus. So this ends up being, we're starting to see what ultimately ends up being the downfall of Almaz in this set. Is he does not respect the meaties of Lucky D. He ends up taking an awful lot of damage. In fact, he brings this 2-0, and then Dan brings it back 3 games straight in pretty quick fashion once Dan turns on the juice, all things considered. And it ends up being a lot of Almaz just getting mauled on his wake up and it just chaining into itself. Yep, challenging him with the dash forward with that crouching medium kick does Dan. A little bit too wide of a gap on the frame trap. He ends up back in the corner. Challenging there. So Almaz's meaties as well. You know, for as tight as it seemed as though they were against Vigil in the last game, not working out for him here. Now there's something to be said that, you know, we've got a 4-frame character versus a 3-frame character, and maybe that's something in play here, is that Almaz isn't used to playing around 3-frame characters, or he's not, in this particular moment, actively playing around 3-frame characters. But 2 games up for Almaz here anyway. Playing at a slightly wider range already is Almaz and establishing a little bit more of a fireball game because Dan has been getting those counter pokes, but no buttons from Dan the second the fireballs start to come out. Nice frame trap again, catches him biting and blocking the uppercut. It seems once again as though when Almaz gets his eye on the prize, he can sort of tunnel vision on it. Jesus, 3 throws in a row. And that's big. This is a big momentum swing. I think that's Dan's first round. Missed dive kick again from Dan. Finally going to the uppercut as an anti-air option and getting away from the weirdness that he had been attempting. Challenges the frame trap. And those view reversals letting Dan get out of the corner as well ends up being really difficult for Almaz. In the last set, we saw him. That's so sick. So I paid lip service to it, and I know this is the set where Almaz loses, and I'm supposed to talk about the stuff that's going wrong, and I think I'm being a little overly critical because so far he's playing really nicely. But that's sick. Using the V-trigger screen freeze, recognizing the hooligan is coming, and V-scale parrying it. That's so sick. He does that, if I recall correctly, he does something akin to that one more time. His use of the V-scale parry is really clever, I think. Yeah, so sitting on match point, but it is not to be. Challenges after the negative dive kick. Stuck in the corner. Well, not in the corner, but close. Finds the V-reversal again. And just like that, he's out of the corner. Almaz stuck. But Dan playing largely defensive, but letting Almaz walk into his space. Yep, goes for the V-skill parry on the V-reversal. Finally, that's actually the same move that we had seen him do against Vigil in the last game. That same frame trap, or frame kill, we've seen him go for a couple of times, but doesn't really follow it up with anything. This whiff punish. So this is the momentum swing that ends up really being it. Almaz goes from on the verge of winning, and then a crouching fierce whiff punish into V-trigger ends up stealing the game for him, and Dan just runs it back from here. He just kind of mauls him. Challenging that walk forward again. It feels as though Almaz is playing with an aggression that he hasn't earned now. And I talk about this a lot, about how if you want to play a certain way or you want to play in a certain spacing, you need to consider what your opponent has that will defeat that option and actively suppress that. And challenging with the wake-up jab. Once again, the 3-frame seeming as though it's giving Almaz trouble. Bites in the shimmy, does Almaz. But that standing medium kick and crouching medium kick working out really nicely for him now. Stuck in the corner. If I recall correctly, this round ends up being disgusting for Dan. Yeah. Yeah, and answering back with such a quick game. But so what's going on? Almaz, his gameplay looks loose. It's looking tight. It's looking like he's playing face forward. He's walking into a lot of Dan's stuff. He's not respecting a lot of these frame traps. It's not even necessarily like Dan is going straight into low normals when Almaz is trying to walk back, which I had alluded earlier that I thought maybe was the case when I had watched this earlier, although that's certainly a part of it, is that Dan is going for these things and recognizing that Almaz isn't blocking, but that's sort of the big picture item, is Almaz isn't blocking. He's letting Dan maul him and bully him. Now, granted, Dan had a round earlier where he got 3 throws in a row. That's going to stick in your head. And it's going to make you fear the throw. And Cammie's a character, her walk speed's so good, her throw range is really good, and all of her buttons sort of give her that opportunity to establish that micro walk kind of game. That's going to stick in his head. I kind of believe that it was partly that, and then partly being on match point and losing to that V-trigger with punish. That is what ultimately ends up costing him this set. I think he just gets, to be frank, I think he gets mind-fucked. And you sort of see he looks a little lost in the player cam, that lean forward. And he's still playing a solid ground game. It's not like he's not playing well anymore. It's just when Dan is getting started, earlier in the set, Almaz was waiting his turn, and it doesn't feel like he is, and Dan is finding that he can steal his own turn more. And geez, when you are gonna take a risk like that, if you're gonna whiff and Dan's gonna punish you, Jesus, even the max range jump-ins. No anti-airs either. This ends up being a big deal too. Is that he's not anti-airing Dan at all. And I think he interrupts or plays around one V reversal from Dan. I don't even know that Dan gets V trigger particularly often. He burns a ton of V reversals. And just backdashing, playing around the fireballs. Dan is a Dawson player through and through, man. 3-4 backdashes in a row just to go back full screen. He only needs a pixel. Why is he going to do anything? Let you hang yourself. Once again, we saw crouching fierce and then a low poke. If he was like a pixel closer, he would have caught Almaz walking back, because Almaz is trying to play the game. He's trying to do the dance. Jesus, this sequence is part of what tells me that I don't know what he's doing, but it's not right. He's not playing patient, and Dan ends up taking it, but with just a mauling. That was 4 straight rounds in an absolute mauling. But even in saying that, his ground game was solid. He just cracked on defense, and I think in both games you saw a little bit of the foundations of that even in the Vigil game. It didn't slip through his fingers, but it seems as though you saw when he's right there and it gets away from him a little bit, he'll stumble and fall to try to grasp and try to course correct. And he's a young player who's super hungry to prove himself. And I think that's great, and I think he very clearly puts in the work because he's very capable, and his ground game is solid. And his mix-ups are good, and he's got the tricks, and he knows when to pull them out. But in looking at these games, it seems like maybe the tournament nerves get to him more than some of these other players. And when he starts to feel it slip away, he can play a little bit more desperate, and we're going to have to see if that pans out on this Saturday. He's one of the ones that I am most curious to watch on this Saturday, because he's the one on the list whose inclusion I find the most interesting, and he's the player whose matches I'm probably going to be paying quite a bit of attention to because I really want to see how it plays out. And that's going to be it from me. I hope you guys will tune in to CT Mass Battle 2 coming on May 4th. That is this Saturday from the day that I'm recording it, assuming you're watching comparatively close to when it goes live. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.